Hello everyone and welcome to my BFA Quick Start guide series, where I explain you all of the things you need to know in a quick and easy to understand video. In this one we are going to talk about all of the changes made to the Frost Mage going into BFA. As always, the video will be separated into 3 different segments: changes made to baseline ability, spells and mechanics, followed by me showing you the different talent builds, and the third segment will be about the rotation. At the end of the video there will be some bonus content for the people who still want to get the most out of the Frost Mage during the pre-patch. But don't worry, this guide should still be valid and up to date once you have reached level 120. Frost is at its core a very easy spec to get into, as you can make talent choices that will result in a very basic and easy playstyle. This used to be the case in Legion because talents like Lonely Winter and Thermal Void were the default talent choices, and in BFA you can still pick these talents, however they are no longer the best choice by default. This is in my eyes a very welcome change, and in BFA we can choose between a number of different talents. Yes, this means that you will finally have to change your talents from time to time. For example, our Water Elemental is making a comeback, the Glacial Spike build is finally viable and can compete with the Thermal Void one. In total, the Frost Mage saw a very good number of changes. Okay, let's start with the first part of the video. Our chance to proc Brain Freeze has been increased from 15% to 25%. This is a really good change. Blizzard is trying to eliminate the horrible gameplay experience with casting 15 Frost Bolts in a row without getting a single proc. Our Fingers of Frost proc chance has also been increased. Your Water Elemental's Water Jet has been removed. And his Freeze ability no longer generates Fingers of Frost procs, but it does still activate Shatter. Ice Barrier is now health based. Our Mastery Icicles now also generate an Icicle on a Flurry cast, and our Mastery directly increases our Frozen Orb damage. Like Fire, Arcane Intellect has returned as your party and raid buff, increasing the need of a mage in a Mythic Plus and raid even more. Remove Curse has also returned. Let's take a look at the different talent builds. As always, we have our open world leveling and questing build. Tier 15 Bone Chilling, yes, our Water Elemental returns. Second tier, you have 2 options. Shimmer is more fast-paced when leveling, but at the same time Ice Flows can be really good when having a long cast, like for example Glacial Spike. Tier 45, leveling-wise I personally would take Mirror Image, just because of its threat reduction, but of course Incantress Slow is also fine. Tier 60 is really free of choice. Tier 75 is also again free of choice. You might want to go for that double Frost Nova or a Ring of Frost. Tier 90, personally, I think Comet Storm is pretty sweet because it synergizes well with the freeze of our Water Elemental, but again Freezing Rain and Splitting Ice can also be taken. Last tier I would take Thermal Void just because it makes the gameplay go faster. So like with all of my other guides, the idea behind the leveling build is to have fun with it by making the gameplay as smooth and as fast as possible. Next is our Mythic plus Dungeon build. For this one I will put 2 completely different ones, the Glacial Spike one and the Thermal Void one with Comet Storm. Bone Chilling is by far the best choice for Mythic Plus, so yes, I'm very excited to tell you guys that we again use our Water Elemental. Shimmer or Ice Flows, whichever one you like. Always take Incantress Slow as it's our best choice. On the 60 row you can choose between Ebon Bolt and Frozen Touch, both are very close damage wise. When you go Glacial Spike, take Ebon Bolt for that Brain Freeze on demand. If not, you can take Frozen Touch, both are very close in terms of damage output. Next tier is again free of choice. Tier 90, the rule is simple: when you take Glacial Spike, then you pick Splitting Ice, as it will give you the best damage output. For the other builds, take Comet Storm. Freezing Rain is only for those moments when there are really an insane amount of mobs. Of course, for the 100 row, you want to take Glacial Spike or Thermal Void. Don't get me wrong, Ray of Frost is fine, but I don't like it because it's a channeling ability. These 2 builds are both a lot of fun to play, and they do require totally different play styles. Okay, our single target build. Again, you can play Glacial Spike if you so desire, but there is a lot of RNG involved as you need those Brain Freeze procs at the right time to shatter your Glacial Spike. Nevertheless, I'm still a big fan of the playstyle, so I'll show you guys the 2 different single target builds. Lonely Winter pulls slightly ahead in terms of damage on pure single target raid bosses, because we cannot benefit from our Water Elemental's freeze ability, but of course there will be fights where you can use Bone Chilling instead of Lonely Winter. Next is Shimmer or Ice Flows. Some people say that Shimmer is always better than Ice Flows, but when you have to move, for example, as a group from a raid mechanic, then taking Ice Flows might be better, especially for Glacial Spike. For the Glacial Spike build, Ebon Bolt is pretty good, as it can give us Brain Freeze procs on demand. For the Thermal Void build, you can choose between Ebon Bolt and Frozen Touch. Doesn't really matter, they're both very close in terms of damage. Next tier is Free of Choice. Level 60 Splitting Ice for the Glacial Spike build and Comet Storm for the Thermal Void build. Level 100 choice is pretty obvious. Right, on to the best part of the video, where I check out all of the different rotations. The corresponding talents will be shown on the right side. Okay, let's start with the basic rotation first, and we will work our way up from there. At its core, the Frost Mage is all about spamming Frostbolt until you get some sort of proc. This can be a Finger of Frost proc, which should be used right away by casting an Ice Lance. Or Frostbolt can also generate a Brain Freeze proc. To consume a Brain Freeze proc, we cast Frostbolt Instant Flurry into an Ice Lance. Be sure to always finish that Instant Flurry with an Ice Lance. Once you have acquired the muscle memory of always using this cast sequence, then the rest of the rotation is fairly simple. But before we get into the different rotation depending on the builds, I will first go a little bit more in depth on the Shatter mechanic, because a lot of people are not sure as to what it actually does. Shatter increases the damage of our spells by a big amount. There are different ways to apply Shatter on a target. Our Water Elemental, for example, can apply Shatter by using its freeze ability. So people please keybind it and use on-cursor macros, it really helps a lot. A link will be in the description. Our Brain Freeze doesn't apply Shatter on its own, but it does apply Winter's Chill, which is basically the same as Shatter, causing the targets to take damage as if they were frozen. Okay, with that in mind, let's start with the easy chill and leveling build. You can always start by precasting a Frostbolt, use your Icy Vase whenever it's available, use Frozen Orb. If you get anything as a Frost proc, use an Ice Lance. When you get a Brain Freeze proc, use Frostbolt Instant Flurry into an Ice Lance. Next, the important Shatter part. So first you want to use Comet Storm on your targets, and right after that you want to use your pet's freeze ability. This will apply Shatter to the targets, which will make our Comet Storm do way more damage. Use Blizzard when there are a lot of targets, and use Frostbolt as your filler to fish for those procs. Next, let's go over the AoE multi-target for the Glacial Spike build. With the Glacial Spike build, I have two rules. Rule number 1. We always want our Glacial Spike to be shattered on our target, so it can crit for the highest possible amount. This can be achieved by either consuming a Brain Freeze proc, using your pet's freeze ability, or by using Ebon Bolt's Brain Freeze proc. Second rule, when you have between 0 to 2 stored icicles, you should consume your Brain Freeze with a Frostbolt. Don't keep it to shatter a Glacial Spike, you're basically wasting possible Brain Freeze procs. However, when you get a Brain Freeze proc at 3 or more stored icicles, then keep it to shatter your Glacial Spike. Follow these simple rules and your damage is golden. Okay, as always, start with a precasted Frostbolt, use Icy Veins, use Frozen Orb, cast Blizzard, dump any Fingers of Frost procs with an Ice Lance. Start casting Frostbolt. If you get a Brain Freeze proc, use it, while keeping the rules that we discussed in mind. Now personally, when I have reached 4 icicle stacks and I already do have a Brain Freeze proc, then I shatter my Ebon Bolt first, because I no longer need it as that possible Brain Freeze generator. And after that, it's time for that big Glacial Spike damage, and always finish your Glacial Spike off with that Brain Freeze proc. Then you can use Cone of Cold, Frostbolt as your filler to fish for those procs, and start rotating between your cooldowns. Of course, with the Glacial Spike build, there is always the possibility of wasting, aka munching, possible Brain Freeze procs. At the end of the day, that is just the nature of the build. Next is the Thermal Void with the Comet Storm build. As always, start with a precasted Frostbolt, Icy Veins, Frozen Orb, cast Blizzard. Now cast a Comet Storm, and right after that use your pet's freeze ability on the target, so your Comet Storm can benefit from the Shatter buff. Dump any Fingers of Frost procs with an Ice Lance. Consume your Brain Freeze procs with a Frostbolt. Shatter your Ebon Bolt when talented. After that you can use Cone of Cold again, and Frostbolt as your filler to fish for those procs. And then again you can start by rotating between your cooldowns. And that is it. As you can see, it's a lot easier than the Glacial Spike build. Right, onto the 2 single target builds, starting with Glacial Spike, which is almost the same as the AoE one. Precast a Frostbolt, use Icy Veins, Frozen Orb, dump anything as a Frost charges. When you have a Brain Freeze proc, consume it while keeping the rules we discussed in mind. Once you have reached 4 icicles and you have a Brain Freeze proc, use your Ebon Bolt with an instant Flurry Ice Lance. After that, it's time for that big Glacial Spike damage together with your Brain Freeze proc. Use Frostbolt as your filler, dump any procs that you get while following the rules. Of course, aligning some of your cooldowns is key into making your Glacial Spike hit as hard as possible. Almost there guys, last but not least, our single target Thermal Void build. Precast a Frostbolt, use Icy Veins, use Frozen Orb, dump anything as a Frost procs, use Comet Storm when talented, consume a Brain Freeze proc with a Frostbolt if you have one, use Frostbolt as your filler and consume any procs that you might get. And that is it for all of the rotations. Let's jump into the bonus content of the video. Last but not least, here is what you can do to get the most out of your Frost Mage during the pre-patch. To maximize your damage, combine the tier 21 4 set with the tier 20 2 set. Shouldn't you have any tier 20 pieces, then only go for that tier 21 4 piece. Now for legendaries, when you do play with the tier 21 and tier 20 combination, then combining the legendary wrist and Shard of the Exodar will be your strongest option. When you're only playing with the tier 21 4 set, then you can use the legendary hat and the legendary wrist. When we are playing with the tier 20 set, our Frozen Orb will give us a damaging buff, so do keep that in mind while doing your rotation. You might want to check out my Entor's Glacial Spike guide for that one. A link will be in the description. And that is all for this one, ladies and gentlemen. Please do be aware that this is still kind of a basic guide, just for the people that want to catch up with their class in a quick and easy manner. Like the video if you liked it, put any comments in the comment section down below, and of course, don't forget to subscribe to the channel if you want to see more WoW videos. Thank you so much for watching, guys, and I'll see you next time.